Alright, so this is the point in the story where the narrative actually begins. We've gotten past the prologue of the first 33 lines, and remember it's going to begin in medias res. The Trojans, led by Aeneas with 20 ships, have now set sail from Sicily. They had previously been on Sicily, and we will learn all of this in Book 3 that Aeneas will tell. It's a flashback story during the banquet at Dido's palace with, of course, all the others in attendance. But on the island of Sicily, they have been helped out by a king there named Acestes, and also, unfortunately, on Sicily is where the father of Aeneas from old age has already passed away. And so Anchises is not going to be with them as they are now at the beginning of the story told by Virgil in medias res of setting sail. So let's go over it. So, weeks is an adverb that simply means scarcely. So scarcely, a conspectu. Remember that you can take a fourth principal part, like, for example, the verbs spicio, spicere, speci, spectus, and conspicio, conspicere, conspeci, conspectus. And you can turn it into a fourth declension noun, and that is conspectus, conspectus. And if the verb conspicio means to catch sight of, then a conspectus in and of itself is a sight. So, scarcely, out of the sight, siculae telluris, of the Sicilian land. Siculus aum is merely an adjective that is modifying telluris, a third declension noun that would have this dictionary entry. It would be tellus, telluris, and thus it is in the genitive, a third declension, and it is feminine, as you could tell by modified siculae. So scarcely out of the sight of the Sicilian land, the Laeti, the happy guys, and this indicates probably the nature of them wanting to get on with their journey, wanting to get out there in the open sails. The happy guys were giving, do dare dedidatus, their sails. A velum, as in velum veli, is a name of an awning or a sail canvas, and that's what we have here as the plural of that second declension neuter. They were giving their sails in altum. Now remember, altus aum is going to mean either high or deep, depending upon the context, and here it would be into the high. They are unfurling their sails and letting them begin their journey, filling it with wind. And they were rushing. Ruo ruere means to rush. And they were rushing the spumas. Now, there are lots of words that we, of course, can get from this, spuma, spumai, but it means like a foam. That's why sometimes when a sparkling drink can be known as spumante. And that is what we have here, like sea foams. And they, the happy guys, were rushing the foams of the salt. And again, this is metonymy. Solace is the word for salt, where we get tons of words like saline solution and all sorts of other things as well. And so the foams of salt is another way of saying the sea, the ocean, or whatever it might be. And they were, of course, rushing those foams of salt with bronze. And this bronze business is indicating the front of the ship, which, remember that when ships entangled in the ancient world in warfare, they were basically playing bumper cars and trying to ram one another and sink. And so that's the front part that's kind of like almost a plow going through the earth. And so they were rushing those foams of salt with the bronze. In other words, they're on their way, they are making their journey, and they're barely out of the sight of the land of Sicily. So we continue on this out of the video when I'm done. Cum uno. Now please remember that whenever you see the word cum, the first thing that you need to do is to look to see if there's an ablative. Uno is in the nominative because her name is, oh, there we are, Eunonis, and thus Euno, and the form in and of itself, is in the nominative. So when Juno, and she is described by the present active participle, servans, from servo servare, which of course means to save or preserve. And I think maybe preserve would be here. Preserving the aeternum vulnus. Now vulnus is a neuter word. It's vulnus in the nominative, vulneris. And remember, the rule goes that if it is a third declension word whose nominative happens to have the letters us, it will be neuter, and that is how it is the direct object of the present active participle servans. Preserving an eternal wound under her heart, under her chest, pectus pectoris, just like vulnus, vulnerus, a neuter word, here in the ablative, object of sub, and it's where we get the word pectoral to describe your chest muscles, but it often is going to not just mean your chest, but your heart. So preserving an eternal wound under her heart, under her chest. And something I'd like to point out here as far as literary device is concerned is that whenever you separate words that naturally go together, like an adjective, and the word that it modifies, this is known as hyperbaton. It is merely a literary device in which you separate naturally occurring words together with a great distance here they're separated by obviously 3 words in between. So when Juno, preserving the eternal wound under her heart, under her chest, she implied, says, although the word is not there, just like we've seen him plenty of times at Ecce Romani, these things, and this of course, haec, is neuter, a neuter plural accusative. So, she says, these things, haec right there. Haec could be nominative singular, it could be nominative plural neuter, or accusative plural neuter, and it's accusative plural neuter as we see it right here. She says these things, secum, with herself. Now, what you have at this point is an accusative of exclamation, and we can translate it as though it is the subject, even though it is in the accusative form. And remember that whenever we are using something as an accusative, like what we see in indirect statement as a subject, we will then, of course, have an infinitive verb. So, she asks, am I the Wictom one? From Winco, Wincere, Wiki, Wictus. And thus it is a perfect passive participle coming from the fourth principal part. That is the word that means to conquer or defeat. Am I the one having been defeated? Am I to desist? To stop, and that's a bird word. Bird word is a term that I use in which I can mean that all you got to do is look at the direct derivative that comes from it, and that word desist means to stop. So am I, having been conquered, to stop from the incapto thing. And that again is a perfect passive participle from incipio, incipere, incapi, incaptus. And we use it substantively. Am I, the one having been conquered, to stop from the thing having been begun? What she's doing is talking to herself here, probably working herself up into even greater anger than what she would have originally started out with, and she's basically saying, am I just going to give up from what I had started? And what she had started, of course, is the attempt to thwart Aeneas and prevent him from being successful in his journey. So am I, the one conquered, to stop from the thing having been begun, from an inception? Nec posse, nor am I not able to turn away, avertere, vertere means to turn, avertere, the king, regem, of the Teucrians from Italy, because of from, a ablative of place from where. And the Teucrians is another term that we use for the Trojans. They are called that because of a legendary founder within their whole founding story, a fellow by the name of Teucer, and so they're known often as the Teucrians. So, nor am I able to turn away the king of the Teucrians from Italy. Quippe, obviously, and that's what quippe means, vetor. Now the verb veto, vetare means to forbid. Here, we have it merely as instead of present active, veto, vetor, present passive. Obviously, I am forbidden, I am being forbidden by the fates. And this is the point that she is getting very angry about. She is a goddess, should be able to do whatever she wishes, but she is being prevented, and it must be that the cards of fate, that the destiny or the fates themselves as the entities known as the parcae. Remember, they are Atropos, Clotho, and Lachesis are preventing her. She then brings up historical precedent. Very often when you might necessarily want to do something and your parent says no, you'll bring up the fact that obviously one of your siblings were able to do it. And it's unfair. And that's exactly what she does. She brings up another goddess, and that goddess is Pallas, who of course represents Minerva, the goddess of wisdom, and an incident involving her and her gaining vengeance upon somebody who had made her angry. And so she brings it up again, with again asking a question, just like the Nay of Manet asked a question, the Nay of Pallas. And so she asks, was Pallas able, possum posse potui, has Pallas been able to burn, exuo exurere, the Argive fleet? That is, of course, classis, and that is where we get the word class, as in a particular level of something, where we, of course, even use the term now in the modern Navy, in which you would be a chief petty officer, first class. It is your grouping, and that originally comes from the word for fleet. And remember that Argive, here's an adjective, is merely modifying it, telling it's referring to the Greeks. Remember that the Greeks are referred to as the Achaeans, the Argives, and all kinds of other names, just in the same way that the Trojans were referred to as the Teucrians. So, Pallas, was she not able to burn the Argive fleet? Atque and mergo, mergre, merci, mersus, and with a sub on the front. Remember, submergo means to submerge, to drown, if you would like. And remember, that turns into an M due to alliteration. And was she not able to drown they themselves, referring probably to the Argives, of the Argive fleets, to drown them in the ocean? This word is another one of the words for sea. There are tons of them. When we get to Caesar, you will find that it is very different. In poetry, use all kinds of synonyms, all kinds of words, tons of them, to indicate the sea. There is, of course, mare. There is, of course, pontus. There is ichor. You sometimes refer to it merely as the altum, or the deep, if you would like. But once you get to Caesar, every single time Caesar refers to a river, it's always flumen. It's never all the other words that we have as well in English, like brook, stream, river, all that sort of stuff like that. So, was she not able to drown themselves in the sea, by, with, because of, from, in, on, at? And to do so, ob noxam, on account of the wrongdoing, that's where we get the word noxious, and so forth and so on, and on account of, so ob is taking noxam as an accusative object, and it's taking furias, and on account of the madnesses of one guy, and then that is modifying that genitive there, Ajax of Oileus. Remember that there are two guys named Ajax in the larger Trojan cycle. You have Ajax the Greater, who is the son of a fellow by the name of Telamon, and we often refer to him as Telamonian Ajax. Then you have the son, Ajax of Oileus. And this is the guy known as Ajax the Lesser because of his lesser ability on the battlefield, but also he was probably younger and just less important as a whole. And what we are talking about here is the vengeance that was gained upon him on his way home. What Ajax, the son of Oileus, did was that he raped Cassandra as she was trying to, remember that of course is the daughter of Priam and Hecuba, the king and queen of Troy, and she was seeking refuge in the temple of Minerva. And he had the audacity to go in there and defile the temple of Minerva by raping Cassandra within that temple when she was trying to seek refuge, especially from the goddess. And so she, Pallas Athena, or Minerva, if we're using the Roman terminology, has gained vengeance. And not only vengeance upon him, but vengeance upon the whole fleet, and drowned all of they themselves in the ocean. And again, she's bringing it up that she was able to do so on account of the wrongdoing and the madnesses of one guy, one fellow, Ajax of Oileus. And then we find out how it was that she had gained vengeance upon him on his way home back to Greece, after obviously the war was completed for his wrongdoing and his sin of raping Cassandra in Minerva's temple. She herself, we are referring again to Pallas Minerva, having thrown. Now, that is a perfect passive-looking participle, and as such, remember that they look passive, but they translate actively. And it's yakulor, yakulari, yakulatus sum. And so not having been thrown, but having thrown. And it will take then a direct object. She herself having thrown the rapidum ignem, the fast fire, the rapid fire, and it's the rapid fire of Jupiter. and having thrown it out of the clouds. Nubes, nubis, and nubibus is the ablative object of A. This is referring, obviously, the rapid fire of Jupiter to the lightning bolt. Now, really quickly, something odd about Jupiter's name in Latin. In the nominative case, it would look like the following: Jupiter. But then you have what is known as a paradigmatic split. And after that, for genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative, the stem becomes yo, 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 and yo. And it then takes third declension endings: yo wis, yo we, yo wim, and then of course yo way. And that is why very often he is referred to as Jove, and where we get the English words like jovial, as well as, of course, a few others. But nevertheless, know that in the nominative, Jupiter's name looks like that, but in every other case, and that is why it is Jovis, the genitive here. So she, having thrown herself, having thrown the rapid fire of Jupiter out of the clouds, quae, quae. She both, remember et means both, and quae can work in the exact same way. A polysyndeton. She both disyegited, and here with the dis on the front, it's throw about, or if you would like, scatter. And so that's exactly what she has done here. She scattered, perfect tense, the boats, and here all you have to do is add the F, and you get the word rafts. The rates are the boats. She scattered the boats, and not only both did she scatter the boats, and she, huerta, with an A on the front of it, the long E, she turned out, or turned over the seas. Remember that the ichor is the sea in and of itself. It's the levelness, so by metonymy, she overturned the seas with the winds. Ventis comes, of course, from ventus, venti, and that is, of course, why we call them the air vent. It is the location where the winds come from. So, she got mad at this guy, having thrown the thunderbolt. She both scattered the boats, and she overturned the seas with the winds. Then we find out the third thing she did. She scattered, she overturned, comma, and she corripuited. The U tells me it's perfect. She snatched up, she grabbed up that guy, illum from alud, that guy experantem. Another present active participle that we can see modifying that guy, breathing out flames. That is the accusative direct object of experantem, the present active participle. She snatched up that guy, breathing out flames, transfixo pectore, from his chest. We had just seen that word previously. From his chest, having been pierced, having been fixed through. And so apparently, the reason why that guy is the one breathing out flames is that she has pierced him with a thunderbolt, and of course, the lightning is escaping from his body, shooting out of the hole that she has created with him, and she snatched him up because of from in a whirlwind, turbinus, that's where we get the word turbine, obviously, quae, and it's that same verb here, in fixit, from fingo, fingere, I'll write it out here, fingo, here we go, fingere, and then of course, fixie. And it means to like affix or establish or really even like you know, fasten, if you would like. And she fixed him, fastened him, or pierced him, impaled him on a scopulo. The word scopuli is a sharp rock, or I will use this term so much, it is a crag. And crag is a term for a sharp outcropping of rock. And so she grabbed him up in a whirlwind and then impaled him on a sharp crag. Acutus aum, it's where we get the word acute. It means sharp. And so, basically, she got mad at this guy, and on his way home, she zapped him with the thunderbolt, she took him up in a whirlwind, and she then skewered him, or impaled him on a rock, a sharp rock, out in the middle of the ocean. And so she, Juno, brings this up, because that's exactly the sort of thing that she wants to do to Aeneas. And she's bringing up, just like you might bring up something being unfair with your sibling, like if my brother, my sister was able to do it, why am I not able to do so? And that is exactly the sort of sentiment that Juno was offering. And then she goes on and throws her bit of a pity party, expressing of how it's unfair. Much in the same way that you would express to your parents that it's just unfair. If they got to do it, why can't I do it as well? And so she continues on to line 49, which is where I'm hoping to get with this segment. But I, ost, is the same thing as ought. It's just the word that means but or and. But I. Now, there are 6 kinds of whos. There is an I who, there is a you who is my favorite. There is a he who, and of course you who is my favorite because I very much liked that chocolate drink when I was younger. I who, you who, he who, we who, y'all who, and they who. Now how can you tell what kind of a who it is from Quick Quack Mode? You go and look at the verb. And since it is in Cato, you know that it is an I who. But I who. Now the verb that is here in Cato, and let me go ahead and erase this and write the principal parts, because I cannot explain how many times I write these principal parts on the board and inevitably people forget them. So here it is. Cato, messed up on that. Cato, cadere, kesi, and kesus. It is the word that means to go. Now you put lots of prefixes on it in order to be able to go back. Re-Cato, and thus recede. You can go forward, pro-Cato, and the list goes on. You can go in Cato, and that's what we have here. Now, instead of just simply go, which is what this word means, I like, since the fact she's bringing up who she is in not so uncertain terms, I like to translate this as strut. Because that's exactly the sort of going or walking, which is what this verb means, that she would be doing. But I who strut. Now, regina and soror and conjuncts are all nominatives, and thus they are functioning as appositives. And whenever you have an appositive to tell you who exactly the subject is, you can translate it as. So I could say, I, Mr. Adams, as your Latin teacher, act a certain way, but I, Mr. Adams, as the father of my children, act a certain way. I, Mr. Adams, as an employee of Eastside High School, act a certain way, or as a colleague to my other fellow teachers, act a certain way. And so you could just simply say as. But I, who strut as queen of the gods, and again, this is an example where it should be divorum, but the or is dropped out due to syncopation, and it is genitive plural divum. And so she's bringing up the whole, do you know who I am? And frustrated that her status is not granting her or allowing her to get what she wants, which is the destruction of Aeneas. But I who strut as queen of the gods, que, et, huge polysyndeton, and as both sister and spouse, conjunx, conjugus. That's where we get the word conjugal. Whenever there is a visit in prison, and it's a conjugal visit, it's a visit between spouses. And so, both sister and spouse of Jupiter in the genitive. So she brings up the fact that she's the queen of the gods. She's a big deal. And she's got connections to the king. She's both the sister and the spouse. She says, I, ego, and then our verb is gero. Now, gero comes from gero, gerere, gesi, gestus. And when it is with the word bellum, bellum, belli, a second conjugation neuter word, so that's going to be accusative plural, it is going to translate as wage. Usually gero is like wear, as in clothing. It can even mean to carry, but in this instance it's going to be wage. I wage wars, una cum gente, with one race, and then duration of time and extent of space is always expressed in accusative case. For the duration, so many years. And so, she is lamenting the fact that she's constantly having to fight against these Trojans, that she's held a grudge against for a long time, and we find out what those grudges are, or we have found out what those grudges are previously, when we go back to, of course, the judgment of Paris, and even back to the rape of Ganymede. But, with one race I wage wars for so many years. And then she is going to start again pitying herself at quisquam, and we go and look at our verb, and it's adoro, adorare. And that means to worship. And obviously, it's where we get the word adore. And does anybody worship the divine power? We saw this word before. It is not nomen, name, but it indicates like the divine spirit or the divine power, the essence of the god or goddess. And does anybody worship the divine power of Juno? She's basically saying, am I not also a god? Does not anybody, honor and worship me? Am I not equal to Pallas, who was able to do this, to, of course, Ajax the Lesser? Criteria, additionally, or in addition, or besides, does anybody worship the divine power of Juno? Or will anybody? Pono ponnere, a third conjugation with an E, makes it future. And will anybody, that is nominative, a supplex is a suppliant, or one who begs. And will anybody as a suppliant, will anybody put or place honor, honorum, on ablative my altars? Now, do not confuse aris with several other words that begin with A. This is ara, arai, and it is an altar, like where one does sacrifices and or worshiping. And so she's basically saying that if she is not afforded the opportunity to act like a goddess and to be able to bully around mortals in the way that she wants to, particularly Aeneas, in the way that Pallas had been able to, what is the point of anybody even worshiping her as a mortal human? And so, does anybody worship the divine power of Juno, in addition or besides? Or will, future, anybody as a suppliant put honor on the altars, or on my altars? And so in this way, again, she is lamenting that she wishes that she would be able to do something. And she brings up the fact that others had been before, and basically having somewhat of an attitude of feeling sorry for herself, that she's not able to enact the vengeance and to use the power of her divinity, her numen, in a way to thwart Aeneas and his journey. So,